I'm gonna talk about a measurement that I've been doing using an app on the cell phone. It's called Lux, Lux. But there are many apps for the cell phones that can measure nits, basically, of any light sources. So that's very interesting because, of course, that's not gonna be an accurate measurement by any stretch of the imagination, but it is a reference to compare. So it is not accurate, but it is interesting and is going to allow you to set up the HDR settings of every single game the best way. You can watch a video and that helps too, but I think it is interesting to play around with that. So, for example, on Red Dead Redemption, I was measuring HGIG against dynamic tone mapping on. And with HGIG, I measured the sun and I got 755 nits. So that sounds about right because that's what this TV can do, 7 to 800 nits maximum. So if the sun was 755, that's very good. So with dynamic tone mapping, it was measuring like 500 nits, and there was no way to raise that. So basically, dynamic tone mapping, most of the time, what it's doing, it is taking away brightness from the highlights. So that's why you see an overall raise of the brightness for the entire image, but it's taking away from the highlights. So if you see that behavior on a game, you know for sure HGIG is gonna be the best option because HGIG is not dynamic tone mapping. It is tone mapping, but it's not dynamic. So the bad thing about dynamic is that sometimes you see a very bright highlight like the sun, and if you stare at the sun for a moment, it's going to dim a little bit. And you can also measure that with your cell phone. And also sometimes you can go to a dark area that is going to get a little bit darker with dynamic tone mapping on. But sometimes it's better. Like I would say on the games that have the HDR settings messed up, like you're struggling, oh, there's no way I can get this right, dynamic tone mapping would probably do a better job. And that happened on those games that they design the HDR with a big brightness that's just insane, like 10,000 nits. A game like Microsoft Flight Simulator, it was mastered to be like 10,000 nits. It's just ridiculous. There's no display on the market that can do that. I don't know. I don't know why would they do that. Future proof or something? I don't know. But anyway, on this game, for example, Horizon Zero Dawn, there was no way I could adjust the sliders properly, and this is what I end up with. Dynamic tone mapping on, and I go here to the HDR settings. By default, the white point is on 300. So because I'm using HDR tone mapping on, I lowered this to 190. So usually the paper white of the HDR games should be set, that lower number should be set to 180 if your display can do 800 nits, 190 if your display can do 900, and 200 if your display can do 1000 nits. And that recommendation is something that I heard from Ninjishin, and he's a professional calibrator. He has a YouTube channel, so I was listening to one of his live streams, and that was his recommendation for every single HDR game. So that works very well on this case. I am not sure this 190 is exactly the lower number. Well, yeah, I am sure. Yeah, this is the lower, the lower luminance level. So it's default 300. So you lower that to 190. You keep this on 50 because if you raise this, it's changing the colors. It's diluting the colors. So you don't want to touch this HDR brightness. Instead, you want to touch this brightness number. And this brightness number is not affecting the colors. It's not diluting the colors. And I tested that. So I have this set to 90. Why? If I set it to 100, I am looking at this triangle, you know, the bright triangle, and I want to still be able to see the circle inside. And if I have this on 100, I can barely see it. I want to see that better, so I set it to 90. It can be 90, 85, but 90 is the sweet spot. You know, having a bright enough image, and still be able to see detail on the bright areas. So these are the settings that I determine are the best based on what I see. And also I tested with the app, I tested the sun, and I got like 500 to 600. It was not the sun, it was the moon. I was testing the moon at night. I got like 500 to 600 nits. So that sounds pretty good. And we're gonna see the day time is about to come. This game cycles from day to night very fast. So the day is almost here. So we saw during the night there was no crushing. Let's see how it looks during the day. Let's see if it looks good. Yeah, so this game looks very good. And I'm using G-Sync, by the way. I'm not using black frame insertion because, you know, to test HDR you don't want to turn on black frame insertion. So yeah, that's just a trade-off. The only way to get HDR and perfect motion resolution would be with an impulse display, and that doesn't exist with HDR. So basically, HDR means perfect HDR means blurriness, unless developers start to adjust for HDR with black frame insertion, something that's not going to happen in the foreseeable future because they can barely give you proper HDR settings, let alone starting to adjust for black frame insertion, which most people don't use. I mean, most people don't own an LG or an OLED to game. I mean, because, to play games, because this is very expensive. So I'm not expecting any better from game developers on that. But I'm sure it is possible to adjust for black frame insertion. You're never going to get the highlights the best way, but at least you can get proper luminance. So for example, Watch Dogs Legion HDR, you see now during the day looks very, very bright, but I still see details on the clouds close to the sun, but it's almost blinding me. It's very, very bright, but I still see details. See, I still see details on the clouds. I don't know if you can see it on the video. Yeah, you can see it. It's still showing details. It is very bright, and I can see everything very well. So I think I nailed the settings. The color saturation, I have native color gamut, a color saturation on 50. That's what I like. That's what looks closer to my plasma TV, which I love. So if it looks like the plasma, it's good to me. That's my reference. Plasma colors are perfect for me. So yeah, it's looking pretty good. The luminance level is looking pretty good. The colors are looking very nice. You see those green, green, those green leaves over there look pretty amazing. Yeah, everything's looking good. So I think I nailed the settings. So I was saying, Watch Dogs Legion, for example, has like the brightness number. It's like raised, and that I think that would be perfect for to adjust for black frame insertion. In the case of Watch Dogs Legion, I am sure they just have, HDR setting messed up. That's it. But I think that what they can do on games to have a setting for HDR and black frame insertion at the same time is just give you something that has a higher brightness, basically. But you cannot do that, otherwise you have no blacks. So 51 for me is the perfect brightness for my TV. It depends on your TV. If it's brand new, it's probably gonna be better 54 up to 56, and with use you have to lower this number and you're going to end up on 50, 51, maybe 52. So you adjust this number until you no longer have perfect black. So for example, on 51 I have perfect blacks. If I raised it to 52, it's no longer perfect black. And how do I test that? I get a black background, I turn off all the lights, and I just put my my nose close to the screen, so I check that brightness. So this screen brightness is called black level. So that's it. These are my settings. Color, white color gamut, native, color on 50. I show how to adjust this with the color control app. Is the only way to change that on game optimizer mode. Warm 50, and I have all the automatic stuff turned off, basically. Everything that's automatic or AI, all that crap is off. And this is looking perfect. It's looking absolutely amazing. No complaints. No dark rush, no color dilution, detail on the clouds is perfect. I cannot get better settings. And I've been testing this a lot. A lot, and this is the best that I can come up with. I like it a lot. Try it out. See if it works for you. If you have better settings, let me know. If you have a better option, let me know. What are you using? What do you like? So yeah.